Welcome, everybody. This is very exciting. I'm going to talk just for a little bit as people continue to come in. I'm going to get my music off. As people continue to come in, it's very exciting. I have to say, I'm waving. If you think I'm waving at you, I am. It's you I'm waving at. So nice to see you. As we start going, I think we're right on time. I see people still coming in. We're going to spend a moment in welcome, so I think people can gather us as we do that. My name is Heather Gross. I'm the Vice President of Education and Programming at Pearson College. I'm also a year 20, and shout out to those of you I see on the call already. And I've been at the college since 2007, doing a lot of work with admissions and national committees, also with universities counseling. Today, though, I'm just excited to be here to help drive us through some of this first ever Global Village update. And I want to acknowledge alumni who are here, friends of the college, family of the college, former faculty and directors. It's wonderful to see you all here. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues who woke up early in a not quite yet power out, rainy, windy day at Pearson College to be on the call and help us out this morning. So thank you. I am currently in my home with a painting of the Milky Way, the hill behind the college behind me by Gretchen Markle. And my home is situated on unceded territory of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. I live actually immediately adjacent to the Songhees Reserve here in Victoria. And it's an honor to be here and a real privilege to be able to do this kind of virtual work. The college, of course, is on unceded territory of the Chiana First Nation. And when Craig speaks, he may bring more of that story to play. We've really been thinking about where we are and what it means to be somewhere this year, especially with all the disruption. And I want to acknowledge that we can't all be exactly where we want to be sometimes, but here we are, and so grateful for that. I hope you and your families are well. And to get a sense of where we are, I'd like to start off by seeing if we can see in the chat where you are right now. Where are you? If you know what territory you're on. So just put in the chat that. If you need help finding the chat, it's a little bubble window, should be on the bottom of your Zoom call. And when you open it up, there's a place to say everyone. We can start seeing where people are right now. So I see Oslo and Bergen, New Brunswick, Munich. Ah, lovely. I know Benoit has gathered all sorts of data about this call also, but it's nice to see in real time where people are. And Tsuk First Nation, wonderful. Oh, wow, thank you. Atlanta, Georgia, Jerusalem, Israel, many people from Petter Bay. I appreciate you calling in, Toronto, thank you. I'm going to just do a couple bits of Zoom moments here. For this call today, we did decide to make sure everybody had the opportunity to speak, as you saw just happened. But I will ask that you mute yourself when you're not speaking. We're also going to move on. I hope you can see the program for today. We're going to move on to introduce Craig Davis, our incoming head and president. And he's going to speak for a period of time and then leave it open for questions. And I'm going to encourage the questions to come in writing in the chat so that we can handle as many questions as possible during this session. We are then going to go to look at some of the alumni engagement survey results, and finally looking at things that alumni want to be involved in and alumni fueled initiatives. We hope to have another section of questions at the end of the time, and those also we'll try and manage through the chat. We'll see how that goes. I hope that you are aware as you came in that we are recording this session. And if you have any concerns about that, you can contact me afterwards or anyone at the college, and we can make arrangements. And if there's anything you want not to be recorded during the session, I'm happy to change that also. So with no further ado, I am going to introduce Craig Davis, as I said, our incoming head and president. I'm very excited that he right now is on campus, and he is with us now. Over to you.
Thank you, Heather. Wow, that spotlight feature really brings my face into view. Good day to you wherever you are. It is really great to connect with all of you in this new format. Our global village gatherings are intended to improve connection with our wider community and to provide more informal access to the Pearson campus today. So I hope this is the beginning of what can be a regular feature to bring more of you here to get a sense of Pearson life with us as we move forward. So I'm speaking to you from the Heads residence here on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Shiano First Nation. I was hoping to take you on a little tour outside onto the lawn with a view to the Olympic Mountains, a journey down memory lane for many of you, and as a prompt to share some plans for our place-based education at Pearson. But as Heather says, unfortunately it's blowing a gale outside, so that's probably high risk. I'm looking out the window now to see if I can still try it, but I think it's going to be too difficult. So apologies, we're just in the living room here. But 100 days into my tenure as the new head of college, I wanted to focus my contribution today on students. As you can imagine, it's been a challenging, exceptional, and highly complex start to an academic year. When I began in August, we were launching our Quarrientation program, as it was cleverly called, for students isolated in our downtown Victoria hotel. And we had an army of drivers, chaperones, and community members who gave up their time driving students from airports and ferry terminals to the hotel, delivering food door to door following the hotel COVID protocols, and delivering online orientation modules to students both on the island and for those still overseas. So a very, very different start to the year. We then moved into the complexities of providing simultaneous on-site and online learning to our 145 students who are on campus and the 60 plus more via the internet. This has been an enormous endeavor and one that demonstrated the best collaborations between faculty members and students, providing ongoing feedback about improving the learning. And I just want to acknowledge that from our faculty. As with schools and colleges all over the world, this challenge has provided some great opportunities for, improving our provision and definitely engaging with technology in a new way. The biggest challenge, I think, as we continue in this footing is, as I myself am experiencing as an advisor, is really the time zone differences for our students. Many of them are challenged with intermittent Wi-Fi connection, and in some cases, no reliable hardware to access online classes. To give you a sense of this, I have a Lebanese student myself in my advisory group without a laptop, trying to follow online learning via phone, another student in the Democratic Republic of Congo who has limited bandwidth, and another in Mumbai who has been borrowing an internet feed in temporary accommodation. And all three of them insist on staying awake past midnight to gain synchronous access to their fellow classmates and advisees. And of course, we're doing everything we can to try and protect their well-being, by posting videos, using technology to ensure that they don't need to stay up that late to access learning in each other. But many of them just choose to do that because they really want that sense of connection to their classmates and their advisees. And of course, we've exercised all our supports from national committees around the globe, alumni volunteers in the regions, and our UWC connections. However, in addition, many of these same students, like many others, are facing ongoing delays with biometric processing and consulate backlogs. We had a great day of celebration on campus recently, and as you will know, when there's any positive news, everyone jumps into the bay. That was because the Canadian government lifted their general federal restriction for students coming in. But of course, there is still the challenge of getting those individuals through processing because of the consulate challenges around the world. However, being positive, we've had 14 permits approved this week, and students are coming onto campus and getting onto flights. So there has been huge jubilation last night when I shared that news with some students. And I wanted to thank and acknowledge the fact that our board directors, our admissions staff and alumni have all exerted pressure where necessary in order to get our students' applications processed faster than normal. And that has been a really big collective endeavor from the community. So I wanted to thank any of you that may have been involved in that. So meanwhile, our COVID protocols are being followed on campus with mandatory mask wearing in lessons, house bubbles maintained, and of course we have boundary restrictions around the campus limiting access into the wider community. The challenge for many of our second language students and a hard of hearing head of college teaching his own TOK class is understanding conversations through a mask. However, it is also reassuring to learn how our wonderful students are managing to bend the rules by catching crabs off the dock and cooking crab linguine on illegal stoves. So connecting to home via food will always happen by any means necessary. And during my session with our new student council last night, there was even a request for 2 students to hunt deer using traditional tools. So I just wanted to give you a flavor of some of the challenges and some of the optimism and some of the creativity and flavor of our students, even in this challenging set of circumstances. That probably brings me on to another thing I wanted to share with you about what we're doing here as in parallel with all of the challenges, is we are formulating new student decision-making groups who are going to work with staff and faculty together. There are 4 of these groups working initially with college leadership as part of a drive to enhance student agency at Pearson College. So we will have one group that's just been formed to work explicitly on diversity, equity and inclusion issues, on our anti-racism agenda, and also working through our reconciliation action plan that will be published in November, but we are starting our work on the necessary short-term goals from that context. And of course, they will work with a group of faculty and staff who represent them and their context. I'm also working with a broader group that they've decided to call the Student Council that will be working on general strategic improvements at Pearson College. And we met last night, 11 students, and that work has already started. And so it's a great privilege to be able to work that way with such great individuals. We've also had operating for a number of weeks now, a COVID-19 group who meet weekly with Ty Perrone, our Vice President of Operations, and other staff to really work through some of the challenges that we have with our COVID protocols. But of course, they will also continue to work beyond COVID as an operating group, looking at life through issues of the cafeteria and the residences. And they do some really great work. So just this week, they approved a request from some of our Indigenous students to join a protest at Fairy Creek relating to old growth forests. And then finally, we have a social committee who we've formed to help us co-construct the activities for our 3-week winter break. Because as you probably will have guessed, we are keeping students here for that period of time. The second wave situation in both Canada and elsewhere means it would just be too dangerous to have students returning to their homes. So we'll be providing a program for them on campus, and we want them to be involved in constructing those activities. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavor of where we are at the moment, to give you access to the campus, to give you those insights. And I think at this point, I'll just hand over to you for any questions you might have, either related to what I've said or anything generally.
Thanks so much, Craig. So we'd love to have questions in the chat, and I see one already. Is there an update on filling the vacancies on the College Board of Directors, a strategy on filling the vacancies that have been predicted for 2021? Let's start there. And if you have other questions, please put them in the chat and we'll take a look at, we'll take them as they come.
Yeah, and the any answers to these questions will come from the wider leadership team representing on the call, not just from me, but yes, I know that work is near completion, and that will be announced at the November board meeting. So that has happened, but we have to wait till that meeting for it to become public.
Wonderful, thank you. I have a couple questions here. One, how are meals for students handled? And comment on the reconciliation process.
Ty, if you're on the call, you could probably take the question on meals, but I can do that if you're not on the call.
Ty is there, yeah.
Hi there. So meals are still being handled in the dining hall. Only students are permitted to go into the dining hall. So no residents, no teachers, no staff. And they're set up on individual tables with sort of a quad of plexiglass to prevent transmission between the students. And they're all individualized meals, which unfortunately has increased the amount of recycling on campus. But right now, it's the protocols that are being followed are in accordance with health and safety out of British Columbia. And our Aramark service provider is doing an excellent job. And I understand from the students that the quality of meals is still excellent. So keeping them fed and happy.
Okay, see, there's a question there around the reconciliation process with the First Nation community. Yes, we had a really good engagement with Chief Russell Chips from the Shannou First Nation, who took part in the orientation for students. And we have with us on campus our first staff employee from Shannou Beecher Bay, Tawny Chips, who works with us in administration, and also our first student from Shannou, who's joined us as well. And collectively together, we are working through, first of all, the short-term actions of our reconciliation action plan, the ones that we know we can act on pretty swiftly. And then you'll see once that plan is approved by the board, actually, and it will be published so people can see it. But we are definitely working on those actions with our partners from Shannou. That is part of the mandate of the reconciliation action plan. So that is in process, and you'll be able to see evidence of that very soon.
Craig, a couple questions are coming to me privately also, and that's fine. But if you want to put your questions in the whole chat, then Craig can see them also. So if you question about the governance and communicating back, and I think I'll just jump in here and say that people who were nominated or put their names forward for the board governance process, I believe that the annual general meeting is upcoming, and that's when the board would do the further communication. And then this is Pearson College. Question about the diversity committee, question about the impact of our education, a question about the starfish wasting syndrome.
Yeah.
All important, all very different.
Got you. Yeah, on the diversity, equity, and inclusion, we started the year with some fantastic work with Dr. Gunderson, who focused on issues of anti-racist action and worked with specifically BIPOC members of staff and faculty and students. And what we've decided to do on her recommendation is that the BIPOC group of both adults and students have been now connected, and they're going to work through a series of actions based upon that agenda. And we have the responsibility as administrators and faculty and staff to listen and put into place those actions. Another quick follow-up to that, to give you an insight, is the students this week hosted a race morning discussion where they dramatized for them what they considered to be issues that they encounter on a daily basis. And they did that in such a careful and professional way that it was a really great learning moment for all of us around microaggressions, about white fragility, and other issues related to that agenda. So that work is in place. And we also have one of our board directors, Corey Wilson, joining us in a week and a half to work with faculty and students for our Indigenous Education Day, but it also will extend into some of our plans for anti-racist action. So that group is up and running and already doing some great work. The next question on the impact study, yes, we have been talking about that a lot since I've arrived, because one of the strategic improvements we want to make at Pearson is around impact. So the work that we're doing must be evidence-based in terms of what happens to our students and graduates when they go out into the real world, and what evidence do we have for that. And so we're going to pay very close attention to the publishing of that piece of work, which I believe will be published in around about September or October next year. And that's what I found out on a recent heads call. But even before then, we're going to draw on our own data that Benoit and Heather will be working on in terms of our alumni network. And there's also another study that's been commissioned at Oregon State University around the impact of experiential education, which of course is close to our heart here at Pearson. So I think the notion of impact is really, really important, and it will form the basis of our next 5-year strategic plan when we get to work on that from 2022 to 2027. I don't know if anyone else on the team can actually answer the question about the starfish issue. I'm not aware of that, but maybe someone else has some information.
I do know that we've been affected, as has the whole coast. I don't have the specifics on it though.
Yeah.
I just want to comment that some people are putting up their hands. For this part of the question period, we are going to take the questions from the chat first. At the end of the call, we'll have another question period, and that's at that point we can get into more of a discussion if we need to.
Yeah, Heather, there's a question from Fiona, which I think is a really good one to clarify. We spoke about this specifically last night with the student council of 11 students. What we decided to put that in context is that we really wanted to drive ahead on some actions, particularly around anti-racism, on reconciliation, and a number of other issues. So what happened was an opportunity was seized with students who came forward to work with us, in those 4 committees. And then what they've done now, and they're going to share this at the next village gathering next week, is they're then going to lay out what the process will be for election for each of those groups. So in a sense, they've said it's the right way round. We didn't want to wait for a long drawn out process of creating a new ordinance before people could meet to drive on these agendas. I think that will be received by the student community appropriately, that yes, okay, now we know that there's going to be a transparent process of election, and they will hand that over at the appropriate moment this year so that we can do that. But in the meantime, they can work with us on those improvements. Yes, the AGM will be online. What is the difference between leading Pearson versus prior roles? That's a great question. Prior to this, as some of you might know, I was director of education for a large school group, 14 schools across Southeast Asia. They're all IB schools. What is distinctive, I think, is the alumni network and the caliber of Pearson student. I've described this before as, often a lot of the challenges of being head in the kind of IB schools I've worked in overseas is dealing with parent engagements around advocating for their own son and daughter, which is normal. It's a natural instinct. We all do that as parents. What is really refreshing here is having alumni and students putting the same pressure on us to actually adhere to the values of UWC and adhere to the founding principles of Pearson College. So that's a wonderful shift, because often you're trying to push on a progressive agenda in a school, and perhaps some of the parents hold you back because of their particular advocacy for their own sons and daughters. However, in this situation, it's the opposite, and it's wonderful. I love the fact that we're being held to account around our values and principles, which is a refreshing change for me. Let's have a look.
I think there's a question also about fundraising, about how you are addressing fundraising personally, and then also fulfilling your role on campus.
Yeah, no, I think, it's part of the expectation of a new head of college or director to be working outwardly, working with the advancement and external engagement team, having those conversations, evaluating the impact of our fundraising and our philanthropy. And yeah, so that's something I'm really happy to do. I've been on many calls already with donors and friends of Pearson. So I think, in terms of where we are with this, our initial reports that we just did this week, actually, with the board of directors are very, very positive. As all of you will be aware, in the COVID context and the economic context we're in, it's challenging. But in fact, where we are so far, because of the positive support of people like yourselves and the wonderful network we have, we're in good shape. And it's something that I think I'm keen to continue to do, because in those conversations, you're really just talking about the educational provision about student life and about our plans. And I think that's what people are interested in. So that's going well. A number of students on campus, yeah. Oh yeah, Tide's responded to that in terms of the numbers we have and then what we're hoping for. I mean, it is educated guesswork, and the person who's been working miracles with this is Fatma and our admissions team, who's working with Heather. And you know, she is the person we go to literally every 2 or 3 days to find out where do you think we are. But we are optimistic this week that we're going to get a large percentage of our students in. But of course, as I think all of you will understand, there will also come a time when, for their own well-being, you know, we have to say, look, this looks like it may not happen, and you have to encourage students to defer or reapply the following year. That's always been the case for UWC and at Pearson because of particular challenges in various regions with consulate processing. But we are very, very optimistic about being able to get most of our students in.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm going to bring this to a close. Any other students destined to PC at other UWCs? Yes, we did have a transfer process that we went through this year, unprecedentedly, as so much has been in the UWC process. And so we both traded and received students back. I know there are more questions, and I know a couple of you want to speak. I'm going to hold the rest for the end of the session. And if you want to speak or raise your hand at that point, that's when we'll have a chance for more voices. And right now I'm going to shift on. One of the impetuses for, one of the impetuses for this program was to get a sense of the alumni responses to the survey that just happened. Okay, so Richard, if you want to speak now, go ahead, though I am going to hold the remaining questions for the end of the session.
Heather, I was never going to talk to this topic.
Oh, I'm sorry. Your hand is up, and so
Oh, sorry.
That's
okay. Then my apologies.
All's well. It's wonderful to see you.
Thank you.
Okay. That's wonderful. Richard and I, we know each other. We were having a private chat, and we just misunderstood what was going on there. So, Benoit, I'm going to pass it over to you. While I'm passing it over to you, I'm going to launch a poll. So while Benoit is getting ready to speak to this, there will be a poll arriving on your screen.
So it's really a true pleasure to be with all of you today. I've been dreaming about this possibility ever since I started working for the IO, for the International Office back in 1994, when we dreamt of, wouldn't it be great to have all UWCers come together somehow? Now the technology is possible. So I'm here to talk to you about the survey results, an overview of them, and just to put you right back into the feel of what a survey is like, whether you filled it in or not. Please fill in each of these 5 questions and then submit, please, and then we'll start seeing what answers. Some of these are guessing about how many people may have responded to the survey. Did you complete the survey yourself? Just to see how many people engaged with that who appear on this call. And another few questions are, what percentage of alumni have stated that their PC experience is very relevant to their life values? Another one is what percentage of alum have responded to the question whether or not they support PC non-financially. Try to guess what that might be. And lastly, a long list of themes that may or may not have been what we have heard from the alumni. So please, another few seconds, I guess, and then we'll start commenting or quickly comment on the results, give you the answers. I don't know how many people have answered. I can see that you're answering.
We're at 50%.
Yeah, okay, great. I can see that now. Wonderful.
And the survey that's specifically being referenced was sent out this.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Sue McDade, my class, my second year from New Brunswick, asking. In July this past summer, we sent an alumni engagement survey. And it was a rather lengthy survey. It was hosted on othello.org, which is a platform that's been created by one of our own alum, year 15, John Richardson from Canada. And it lasted for a whole 3 weeks. And I'll be telling you a little more what the results are about. So I think that now 80% of you have responded. I think we can share those results, and I can tell you that 19% of all alumni responded. I can tell you, well, now that 74% of you on this call did respond, interestingly. The percentage of alum who found that this is very relevant to their life values is indeed 69%. So most of you got it right. What percentage of alum have responded that they give non-financially to the college? The answer is 58% feel that they have given non-financially. In which of these themes? Actually, all of the above is the correct answer in this case. And we'll be touching on some of these later. So thank you very much for participating. I guess we can stop sharing the results. And oops, I must have done something here. Can we? Okay, thank you. Out of the 3,600 email addresses that we have in our database, that's about 85% of our 4,200 alum. 1,700 actually clicked on the invitation to participate, and 16% clicked on the link to the survey. That was the first email. Several other reminder emails allowed for 600. Can we go on to the, sorry, can we go? These are just a random bit of clippings of the 1,500 comments that we received from all these respondents. So we got 675 responses to the survey, 555 fully completed the survey. And that doesn't mean that the rest of them didn't. It's that they were maybe 80% down the road, 59%, but we have that many responses. This represented 103 of the countries out of the 156 countries that have been represented at the college over time, and 100% of all 45 cohorts. In fact, in the next slide, we can see the distribution of years. So we can see there's no real pattern, there's no real conclusions that can be drawn from this, but certainly a very strong percentage of participation from the first 20 years and high peaks in the latter years. So this is very encouraging. And we feel that this is an excellent response compared to a lot of the benchmarking that one can do in similar organizations where 10% is considered a very strong show. This is, we feel that we have a mandate basically from our alumni. Now, we also know that there's self-selection in these kinds of surveys, and that 91% of the respondents said that they had previously engaged with the college, and 9% only had never, which is, that in itself is encouraging, that we were able to reach people somehow that have not engaged, not been able to, not chosen to, and yet here they are giving us their suggestions. So these are some of the benefits and motivations that I've clustered together. We offered in the multiple choices, but people were invited very often in most of the questions to give their own responses and add their own reasons for feeling motivated. So lifelong friendships by far is the leading benefit that people feel they've had, and motivation to continue being connected with the college. Global reach and networking opportunities were among the other options. People added that it's a constant source of inspiration, a reminder of personal development, character strengthening, sense of idealism and hope maintained through the connection, as well as a sharper sense and understanding of diversity. The next slide is about challenges, because of course these are all very positive, aspects of our PC experience and what we've gained from it, but there are challenges. Of course, time and distance are classic obstacles for all of us to engage in anything at all, but it's especially true in these COVID days that we've noticed. And so the distance from the college, from our homes, but also the distance of our friends from ourselves. Our level of interest also is a variable that goes up and down, ebbs and flows. And then another few additional lack of awareness and unclear access to opportunities seems to be a challenge that some have felt. Of course, that's something the college can do something about. We'll talk about that later. The inability to afford opportunities, that's one of the aspects, of course, of resources. Feelings of inadequacy, imposter syndrome, that's something that's both caused by the college's expectations, but also by our own psychological or experience with the college and what we feel the expectations are. Doubts about continued value and relevance of the PC model also came up as a challenge. The broad interest areas and the willingness to support areas came out strongly in this set. 313, so beyond 60% of our respondents said that they are interested in attending, participating in, and supporting existing and new alum programs. Many would prefer city-based initiatives and events. Of course, that is very true in COVID, and not even that possible, as gatherings are not encouraged anywhere. Thought leadership conferences is a big area of interest and one that's being developed. We'll talk about that a little later. Always great interest in enriching student and campus-centered initiatives, and also designing a new organizational framework for alum engagement. That has come out strongly. We know that there are a few affinity groups out there already dealing with this. We'll talk about that as well. Donating to the annual fund and the college campaign is also, of course, part of the interest and support. In fact, 67% of the individuals responding to this survey were had donated to the college at least once in their lifetime. Please. Now, this is the long list of what could Pearson do more of to encourage and inspire me to us to engage, to get involved. So Pearson could develop more thought leadership in education and curriculum development. This has always been true. We've stood tall about this aspect of our pioneering years and the experiential education, but we have now been sort of caught up by a number of schools in the educational space, and we do feel the pressure of innovating. And so there are another set of new ideas that are coming through, especially with the arrival of Craig. He mentioned some of those. So certainly something that is on the top of our mind. One other aspect, dimension that we've been asked to do more of is the next slide. That PC might demonstrate more respect and act on increasing diversity. Another aspect that Craig did touch on. Aspects of this is that we've had a lot of alumni concerns being shared, especially with Craig. At least over 150 have been reaching out to him. We now have systematic anti-racism training, not since this year, for a number of years now. But of course, we're consolidating that and we're increasing that. We mentioned this, the annual Special Topics Day on race and other measures being taken. Now, PC could also pay more respect and attention to Indigenous related matters and reconciliation. Of course, some of you may already be aware that we did create an Indigenous Visions Advisory Council on which Corey, year 14, Angie, year 16, Christina, year 30 were part of, very much involved. We're developing land acknowledgement approaches very creatively. The students, the alum are getting involved, as well as, of course, the whole faculty and staff team. a reconciliation plan already mentioned, and we have had our first ever full-time employee and student from our neighbors at Beecher Bay, the First Nations. Lastly, PC could offer more specific asks to its alumni and show more appreciation for the time and talent volunteering over treasure. So these again are things that we've been hearing from the alum through the commenting and the open suggestions. Of course, we have intentions of responding. Some of this is already ongoing, but online rolling menu of volunteer opportunities is something that we've long been planning, and that should be coming up online so that better coordination of all our needs on campus or off campus might be made available and more visible to all our alum. And then tailoring our programs. No, you can go on. We've had an obvious revival of alumni-led and alumni-fueled initiatives over these past few months, especially because of COVID, but because of the momentum that had been building. I have a video of one of our alumna from year 4, Fides Kruker, who's a professional singer and a singing coach. And she had this to say about rallying our alum. This may or may not be working, the sound and the rendering.
Okay.
So we'll just—
Sorry, it's playing on my end, so we'll just leave it.
Okay, we'll try to correct that next time. So just to mention, Fides is talking about 2 very significant gatherings that were organized in June and just recently this month. In June, it was the 40-year reunion for years 3, 4, 5, 6. And sadly, they weren't able to come together, and hundreds had planned to come back to the campus. But they did a virtual fete over 2 days, and 150 of them were able to come together. And expertise was developed at how to do these gatherings. And then the next gathering was a so-called common room conversation for years 1 to 7 around communications. So these different themed gatherings and assemblies have been held years 8, 7, 8, 9, 10, and years 34, 5, 6, 7, 8 have been meeting online. And I'm sure many of you have been doing it with your classmates, but this is becoming a more organized and more systematic method of coming together. And it has an effect of creating other such more, I guess, targeted initiatives like a Global Village speaker series and unlocked talks that some of you may have been listening to from the UWC. It also, so one person who's on the call, David Horgan, was the speaker for the Global Village speaking series, the second one on ethical mining. I believe he's on the call, and he'd like to say a word or two about these initiatives that have been out there. Can David jump in?
Sure. Thanks very much, Benoit. Just to say, great experience being on. Some of us in years 3 and 4 have used the chance to re-engage through social media. And we think this offers us an opportunity to get alumni involved wholeheartedly across all the years. We'd like to see an effort made to use the diversity of that engagement, particularly the younger students and students from the Great South.
Thank you. And I believe that there is a project for a village gathering like this one to happen between all the alum, but to start thinking of designing the framework for us to organize ourselves. And speaking of which, there is an alum association that's been gathering momentum, and we have one of the representatives from that association, Carly Downs from Year 2 USA. Carly, can you jump in and tell us a word?
Yeah, sure, Benoit. Thank you. Thanks to Craig and Benoit and Heather for giving us this opportunity to speak about the Alumni Association today. We've been gathered together and reigniting an alumni association, an independent alumni association that has 4 main pillars to its mission, which is to unite people and become a force for change. Our first is alumni well-being and engagement. In that vein, we have developed a project called People Count to help alumni through various sessions led by other alumni to identify some of the symptoms of stress and fatigue that we're experiencing under COVID. Our second pillar is active citizenship, and that would focus on things like climate change and projects around environmental issues, just to name one topic. Another main support is to support the college, strengthening the relationship between the Alumni Association and the college, working together on various initiatives, which would necessarily include fundraising for the college. And our fourth pillar is to support the UWC mission through the projects that we engage in, and also engaging directly with the UWCIO. We've built up quite a bit of momentum, as Benoit has stated. We have contacted alumni from years 1 through 45, and we're working very closely together to continue developing our website and our Facebook page. We invite everyone to please visit our website. I'll put up the address as soon as I'm done speaking. And drop us a line. Let us know what you're interested in and where you'd like to volunteer with the association.
Thank you very much, Carly. And lastly, I just want to mention that there is great momentum building in several cohorts across the board for class year scholarships. And Theron might want to jump in and just mention a word or two. He's a colleague from year 16 and responsible for philanthropy at Pearson.
Thanks, Benoit. I don't know if I'm responsible for philanthropy at Pearson. I work closely alongside our whole team of 10, and especially with Carly Downs, our director of advancement. Not Carly Downs, Carly Malloy, the other co-lady. Carly Downs, you just got a new job, Carly.
That happens a lot there on poor Carly. I feel bad. She probably gets a lot of stuff that's for me.
So I'll just tell a quick story that I think is easier as a way of illustrating. I'm year 16, and we did a process recently to support a student collectively as year 16, a class year scholarship. And so we've done this the last couple of years, but we're particularly matched with, this last year we were matched with, here Heather has helpfully put up this is Alice from Estonia. I was always inspired by her fiery, she's a physically small person, but makes up for that with a fiery presence of passionate activism around LGBT, women's rights, and etc. This little quilt she's holding was made for her. Each square that represents one of the members of our year 16 class that made some gift towards her scholarship. And so we gifted her with this little quilt as our wish for her future. So that's one example. We've done this with quite a few different class years, including with the 40-year reunion from last summer, where we did it actually as a cohort of all 4 class years, where they worked together to try to raise 4 scholarships. So it's a way that alumni, most of us have benefited from receiving full scholarships. And this is a way we can each, as class years lean in, we can all participate at levels that are accord with our means and support the current cohort of students. So I do see a question in the chat of what's a scholarship. It's 60,000 Canadian a year is the cost for a scholarship right now. So those class scholarships are all part of our bigger a campaign that I've been designing over the last few years. We're about halfway through that. So we've raised about 20 million towards our 40 million goal. And that's a bigger container for really everything that we're doing to renew the campus, to secure scholarships, and to do some of the initiatives like we've been referencing here: reconciliation, diversity, marine science, so forth. So that's a very quick study, and I'm sure we'll make some future opportunities to talk more about fundraising with this group.
Thank you very much. I think that I can hand it over now to Heather for the remainder of the question period.
Thanks, Benoit. And I've stopped sharing my screen. The next slide says questions. And I think I certainly enjoy seeing more faces. If you haven't already found a way to see faces in the top right-hand corner, you can choose gallery view and you can see people who are here On my computer, that's 4 pages of people that we can go through. We do have a moment for some more questions, and I did promise if people want to speak to them, that would be possible. Already there are quite a few in the chat. Craig, I think we'll start with some of these broader questions about diversity and equity. And I think those are good places to start. And then there's also questions about fundraising, I see, and alum. And so maybe I'll hand it to Craig first, and then back to Benoit and Theron to talk about some of the fundraising. If you have a question, do put it in the chat. I see that Craig is looking at it. And if you want to speak, you can also put your name in, and I'll do my best to call on you. Before we do all of that, though, I had meant to do something else, which was just to take a moment. Just sit back in your chair or wherever it is and just take a moment. What an honor it is to gather together. And there's business to be done. And what an honor it is to know that there are people to do that work. And so I want to, before I throw it back to questions, just acknowledge that. So thank you. I see some sweet messages also. So thank you for that. We now have 5 minutes left in our official program. We will close and then have some more time for questions after that, just a short time. But before we do that, Craig, if you want to say some things based on what you're seeing in the questions.
Well, if I just start with some of the questions that have come up about diversity, I think that's a huge topic. I'm not going to use up all the time here on that, but I think the priority that people need to, I suppose, understand is that the notion of diversity hires is now central and a priority. So you'll see when those of you that can attend the AGM for the board, when they announce new board membership, hopefully that will be the beginning of the evidence around diversity and inclusion and hiring. And I think we have a responsibility at Pearson College to enact that in every sphere. And the evidence for that, I suppose, to engender trust is that, like I said earlier, we've hired our first member of Shiano Beecher Bay, who works closely with me in administration, as well as obviously also taking our first Shiano Beecher Bay student. So, it's the beginning of that work. We've got to be absolutely clear, as the students were telling us this week in their presentation, around not making things tokenistic. It's around an actually fully fledged agenda. So we are committed to that. And, the issue around evidence of this, the last thing I'd point to is just time. I've worked in international schools overseas for most of my career, and the turnover of staff is high. So you can start seeing evidence of diversity hires very, very quickly. Thankfully at Pearson College, that turnover isn't quite as acute. And therefore we just need to wait for when we do hire new staff and faculty that you can start seeing the evidence of that prioritization.
Thanks very much. I see the question that's being voted up right now, and there are tech tools we could have used to do that, and we're going to look at that for another session of using more than Zoom. We wanted to stay relatively simple this time, but a question about students who are on scholarship, students who are paying fees, whether we're going to be trying to get back to full scholarship, what the interaction is. And I can speak just initially to that as we've introduced the idea of means testing into the program, we have managed to maintain some real balance and confidence around competitive selection and students feeling like they're coming and that they need to be there and that it's good for them to be there and it's the right place for them to be. So that's really increased that. The other thing we've been able to do is to work with national committees more directly on their means testing process. And so that's resulted in additional funding to coming to the college, but without going outside of that process.
If I may, can I jump in?
Absolutely.
Just because one question and one, I omitted to talk about one very significant initiative by Alum, and it was the college launched this year the Alumni Engagement Working Group. And that meant that 20 people volunteered from across the world, from 14 different time zones. The question is asked by Ed Boursier, who was a year 39 on that working group. And he's asking, can we point to any changes or transformations that have occurred since this group worked for 4 months, making recommendations for the college on alumni engagement? And I can certainly gladly say that the survey itself was an outcome of that working group coming together. This call is embodiment of so many of the recommendations, suggestions, and work that was done. The report that will be soon published before the end of this year online will bring a lot more detail and will also reflect the work of the working committee. The reconciliation plan, although it had already begun, was certainly enriched through the work of the working group, because Angie Bain was part of the working group and the advisory group. And then collaboration with different affinity groups, including this Global Village Speaker Series, the Alum Association, and several others, has directly been the outcome of the working group. So I can only once again thank all the 21 alum who from years 1 to 43 who joined us and worked for us hours a week for 3 months. Thank you for that.
Wonderful. I think that's a moment that answers many of the questions around how to get involved. A shout out to volunteering with national committees also, of course. And with that, I would like to bring this to a close. I hope each of you stays safe and stays well. Craig will be able to stay on the line for another 10 minutes or so if you have additional questions for him. But I know this was our scheduled close and some people may need to get on with their evening or their day. And lots of gratitude, and we'll try something again, and we'll try some different formats to see what works and more chance for group discussion. So thank you again. I'll give people a chance to leave if they want to. And then if there are people who have additional questions for Craig, we have about 10 minutes to do those.
Thank you, Heather. Yeah, happy to spend a bit more time answering questions. Going back to the issue of full scholarship, partial scholarship, I think it's important for people who are still on the call to hear that there's no philosophical shift. You know, everyone's desire at the college is to be on a financial footing, you know, where you can return to a model of, you know, awarding entry without having to consider financial context. And so it's really important for people to hear that. Now, everyone also needs to know that the financial context of the college is very different to how it was in the 70s and 80s, you know, in terms of the federal support and widespread provincial support it used to receive. So, you know, that's our new reality, that, you know, our levers that we have in terms of generating money are, you know, advancement, philanthropy, engagement. We get some provincial support, we don't get federal support. And of course, then it's just working with national committees in terms of tuition revenue. So therefore, you know, that's the context we're in. But of course, we want to be in a situation where we don't have to consider the financial links that a student comes with. So, you know, that there is no desire from me or anyone else to change that context. The question came up earlier about what was distinctive about Pearson and UWC compared to all my previous roles. That's part of it. You know, the National Committee selection process is what makes UWC distinctive. That's what, you know, to personalize it, that's my own journey. You know, I was a working class boy from the UK, went to a grammar school. So I was given an opportunity that I wouldn't otherwise have got because of you know, obviously not the same process as national committees, but I'm committed to that philosophically. So it's about how do we try and create a situation to enhance our financial footing, to give us the greatest flexibility to be able to return to that situation. Heather, I'm not sure what in terms of the clustering of questions is the...
I'm going to jump in and just say that one of the suggestions by one of our alum, by Fiona, is that would we invite student voices in next version of this global update? And yes, the answer is we had planned to do that. We felt that we had a lot of content today, and so we stopped at that. But we do plan on doing these 3-4 times a year, and certainly inviting alum in the design of it and also in voicing their thoughts will be important.
Hi, I wanted to I think I'm muted, right?
Not now, we hear you.
Okay, good. So I'm Smada. I'm calling from Paris. I wanted to ask a general question. It might sound provocative, but it's a very honest question because I've been on national committees for many years here in France. I wanted to know, because there's this, I'm not as involved in terms of Pearson and all the financial situations. I was wondering if you think over the years there was a real shift in terms of the general ambience on one hand, and also the demands versus the giving, due to the shift in funding, and to the fact that not everybody has a scholarship, and therefore there's more of since you pay, you demand more, and it's sometimes on the expenses of the ideals that we're trying to promote. Do you, those who are in the college and those who have been following things for many years, do you really feel that within the college, due to the financial contribution that is required now by parents? Thank you.
Madar, that's a really good question, and it's one that we've deliberated upon as a leadership team and as staff and faculty, and of course everyone has their own experience and memory of Pearson College, and there's always a concern that that magic or that context, is that somehow being lost or changed, particularly if there's a significant shift in the admissions process. Now, I'm not best placed to make that judgment call because I'm brand new. But one thing I would add that I think is important to understand, I suppose, in my broader context as an educator, is that student characteristics have radically shifted in the last 10 to 15 years for reasons outside of, I say, a selection process, largely because of social media and the internet. And that's one thing to be fully aware of. And one of the only comparison point I can provide that might be useful is saying, okay, I've been working in IB schools and colleges around Southeast Asia, in places like Hong Kong and Singapore and Malaysia, with expatriate populations who you might say come from a particular socioeconomic context. Nevertheless, much like UWC in Singapore, which works in the same context, you can still shape values and characteristics with those students, even though the socioeconomic context and perhaps the diversity context is shifted. So I'm a real believer in the fact that, you can still create impact, and impact was an issue that was shared earlier about how do we know that our graduates and alum are making that difference, and they carry those values with them into different career contexts. So I would just say that piece, it's really important that I believe that you can consistently create impact and values, even if certain things shift out of necessity. But remember my first point, which is around the fact that we all want to be able to have the flexibility of having that, that diversity, that deliberate diversity, and the fact that it shouldn't really come with a concern around the socioeconomic context of the student as well.
I see a comment from Tessa, who premeditated my thinking. I was like, oh, there's some recent alum on the call today who could speak to that. Thank you, Tessa, for doing that. So certainly they noticed a shift and they engaged in it productively and meaningfully, and that's been very much my observation. Also, I've also observed that as somebody who has been connected with the college through a variety of generations, some of the big changes that have come are ones that the world is facing. So changes around technology and being able to stay connected with home do not necessarily fall upon socioeconomic veins, but really do change the feeling at the college sometimes, when mail is no longer so critical, the getting the letter from home.
Yeah, when I was on a call recently with Carol, who is one of the first house parents at the college, talking about how students would have to queue up to come into her kitchen to use the phone to phone home, and she would monitor that by putting in the amounts in a ledger. And I was thinking, wow, that is more significant perhaps than some of the other factors we think in terms of the context of student life that we're working with. And I think that's a significant piece. Now we have 24-hour Wi-Fi access, and everyone's tapped in. Even those students I was talking about earlier, the ones who are in my own advisor group, who are challenged in Mumbai and Lebanon and the DRC, they still are connected. They still have that connection, even though their own circumstances are challenging, and they're able to do that. So that's a real shift.
Great, thank you. I see some good work in the chat happening around connecting alumni work and the work that's happening at the college. We are trying to have, it's a big tent. There's lots of space, lots of room for work to happen. I have some ideas also around engaging on the learning side. A lot of the work that I do with national committees has been, it's great to come together. It's great to do this business we need to do, but it's also great to connect around issues that we care about, and around how we can mobilize in our own home communities new ideas and new education. So that's all happening too. I promised an additional 10 minutes and I think we're there. I want to thank everyone on the call. I see Hamish has rolled off. I see David has rolled on, David Hawley. It's great to see you, and a lot of gratitude. This recording is, I'm going to pull off the cloud, and I'll also save the chat. If there are questions in the chat that we didn't get to, we're happy to respond to those. We were not trying to avoid any questions today. We're happy to respond to those. And I hope that you'll accept an invitation for another chance to come together when we can have even more discussion. Thanks very much.
Bye.
And while you're all leaving, the same link is valid for the session that's being held this today at 4 p.m. So if you're interested in coming back and asking more questions and getting to connect with more alum, by all means.
After my bedtime, Benoit.
Yeah. If you want to see how we change it between now and then.
Thank you all for your presence.
You.
Adiós.
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 Thanks, everyone.
Gracias.
Ciao.
Au
Au revoir.